The old wooden dock creaked under Tom's feet as he cast his line into the misty waters of Lake Willow. For 40 years, he had fished these waters. His father taught him here, he taught his son here, and now a metal gate blocked the entrance, no trespassing signs everywhere. The new owners, Evergreen Development, wanted luxury homes where generations once caught dinner. Tom stood at the fence, wondering if this was truly the end. Until he heard the rumble of trucks approaching, military trucks, and the men stepping out were the unmistakable trident insignia of Navy SEALs. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. Tom Miller had lived in Pinewood County his entire life. The small lakeside community was all he had ever known. Lake Willow wasn't just a body of water to him, it was where his history lived. Tom's father had taken him to that lake when he was just 5 years old. He could still remember the weight of his first fishing rod, the way his dad's hands guided his small ones as he cast his line. "Keep it steady, son," his father had said. "Fishing teaches patience, the best things come to those who wait." For decades, Tom had fished those waters, through marriage, children, and even after his wife, Mary, passed. The lake remained his constant companion. He knew every cove, every spot where the bass liked to hide in the early morning hours. The lakeside cabin Tom owned was modest, just a small place where he spent weekends and summer evenings, but the lake itself belonged to everyone. It always had, until Evergreen Development bought the surrounding property 3 months ago. "We're creating an exclusive lakeside community," the man in the expensive suit had explained at the town meeting. "The lake access will be restricted to residents only." Tom had stood up then. "That lake has been public for over 100 years. My grandfather fished there, my father fished there, I've been fishing there my whole life." The representative had smiled thinly. "The deed includes water rights, Mr. Miller." "I'm sorry, but that's the law." Tom had tried everything. He contacted a lawyer, but the fees were more than he could afford on his pension. He went to the county commissioner, who just shook his head. "Nothing we can do, Tom. They own it fair and square. The signs went up last week. Metal gates blocked every access point. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." Tom had stood at the main gate for nearly an hour that first day, his fishing tackle box in hand, staring at the chain and padlock. A security guard approached him. "Sir, you need to leave the premises." "I've been fishing here for 60 years, Tom said quietly. "Not anymore," the guard replied. "Mr. Harrington doesn't want locals disturbing the natural setting. The property values depend on exclusivity." Tom walked home that day, his tackle box feeling heavier than it ever had. His grandson was visiting next month. He had promised to teach him to fish, just as his father had taught him. That night, Tom sat on his porch, staring at the distant shimmer of lake water through the trees. For the first time in his life, he felt like a trespasser in his own hometown. The next morning, Tom decided to try one more time. He walked the long way around, taking the trail that few people knew about. His knees ached with each step, but he pressed on through the woods. When he reached the small clearing that opened to the north shore, he saw 2 men in suits examining the area. Behind them stood a bulldozer, its engine idling. "We'll clear this section first," one man said, pointing to a cluster of old oak trees. "The model homes need the best view of the water." Tom stepped back, not wanting to be seen. As he turned to leave, his foot caught on a root. He stumbled, dropping his tackle box. The metal lures clattered against the rocks. The men turned immediately. The taller one approached Tom with a frown. "This is private property, sir. How did you get past the gates?" Tom straightened his back. "I've been walking this path since before you were born. I just wanted to fish one last time." The man sighed. "I understand this is difficult, but we have investors waiting. Security will escort you out." As they waited for security to arrive, Tom noticed a young man sitting on a rock near the shore. He wore simple clothes and had a military haircut. He seemed to be watching the whole scene with interest. The security guard finally arrived, looking annoyed. "Mr. Miller, again? Come on, let's go." As the guard led Tom away, he passed the young man on the rock. Tom noticed the man's water bottle had tipped over. "Your water," Tom said, stopping to pick it up despite the guard pulling his arm. The young man looked surprised. "Thanks. Most people wouldn't bother." "No trouble," Tom replied. "My son was in the service too." "Navy." The young man tilted his head. "How'd you know I was military?" Tom smiled slightly. "The haircut. The posture. My son looked just the same when he came home on leave." The security guard tugged Tom's arm. "Let's go, old man. Mr. Harrington doesn't want delays on this project." As Tom was led away, the young man watched thoughtfully. Tom didn't see him pull out his phone. That evening, Tom sat at his kitchen table, going through old photo albums. Pictures of 3 generations of Millers fishing at the lake spread before him. His neighbor and longtime friend Bill sat across from him. "They're starting construction tomorrow," Tom said quietly, cutting down the old oaks. Bill shook his head. "It's not right. That lake belongs to everyone." "Not anymore," Tom replied, closing the album. "I promised Jake I'd teach him to fish when he visits. Now I'll have to drive 2 hours to the state park." "Did you try talking to the town council again?" Bill asked. Tom nodded. "They said their hands are tied." Harrington made donations to everyone's campaigns last year. Nobody wants to cross him. Later that night, Tom couldn't sleep. He walked to his porch and sat in the darkness, listening to the distant sounds of the lake, the same sounds he'd fallen asleep to his entire life. Tom woke to the sound of someone knocking on his door. The clock read 5:30 a.m. He pulled on his robe and shuffled to the entrance, wondering who would visit at this hour. When he opened the door, he found himself facing 4 men in civilian clothes. They stood straight-backed with short haircuts and alert eyes. The man in front looked familiar. "Mr. Miller, I'm Ryan Dawson. We met briefly yesterday by the lake." Tom recognized him as the young man from the shore. "I remember. What brings you here so early? May we come in? We'd like to talk to you about Lake Willow." Tom hesitated, then stepped aside. The men entered and sat at his kitchen table while Tom made coffee. "I hope you don't mind the early hour," Ryan said. "We wanted to catch you before the construction starts. We're all active duty Navy SEALs." "On leave for 2 weeks," another man explained. "I'm Mike. This is Chris and Jason." Tom set down the coffee mugs. "My son served 2 tours with the Navy, but I don't understand why you're here." Ryan leaned forward. "After we met yesterday, I made some calls." "Your son was Daniel Miller, correct?" Tom nodded slowly. "I've saved my commanding officer's life in Kandahar 4 years ago. Lieutenant Commander Wilson." He took a bullet meant for the lieutenant. Tom's hands trembled slightly. "Daniel never told me details about his service." "He wouldn't have," Ryan said. "But the lieutenant never forgot. When I told him what was happening with your lake, he made some calls." Mike pulled out some papers. "We did some research on evergreen development. They've been cutting corners on environmental regulations, and the water rights they claim to have there are some questions about how they acquired them." Chris spoke up. "The lieutenant has connections with environmental lawyers who specialize in water rights cases. They're willing to take your case pro bono." "Why would they do that for me?" Tom asked. "Because your son is a hero to a lot of people," Ryan said simply. "And because what's happening here isn't right." Tom stared at his coffee. "I appreciate the thought, but Harrington has money and influence. The bulldozers are starting today." Jason, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "That's why we're here in person. We're not just bringing legal help, we're bringing media attention. Several of us have large social media followings from our training videos," Ryan explained, "and Lieutenant Commander Wilson now works with a national news program. They're sending a crew today." Tom looked out his window toward the lake. "I don't want charity.
"This isn't charity, sir," Ryan said firmly. "This is a community standing up for what's right. Your son would have done the same." Tom's neighbor Bill knocked on the back door, then entered without waiting. "Tom, you need to see this.
There's a whole convoy of vehicles heading to the lake." Tom stood at the edge of his property, watching the scene unfold at the lake entrance. A line of vehicles had parked along the access road. Some had military bumper stickers, others were clearly press vans with satellite equipment.
Ryan stood beside Tom.
Word spreads fast in our community. A group of about 20 veterans had gathered near the gate.
They weren't blocking access, just standing quietly in formation. Many wore caps or jackets identifying their military branches.
A news crew was setting up cameras. A woman with a microphone was speaking with one of the older veterans.
"That's Sarah Chen," Ryan said. "Lieutenant Wilson's contact from National Morning News." Tom watched as a black SUV pulled up. Mr. Harrington stepped out, looking irritated. Two men in suits followed him. "What is the meaning of this?"
Harrington demanded, approaching the security guard at the gate. Before the guard could answer, Sarah Chen and her camera crew walked over.
"Mr. Harrington, Sarah Chen with National Morning News.
We're doing a story on public access to natural resources in the Lake Willow situation.
Could we get a statement from you?" Harrington frowned at the camera. "This is private property. I have no comment." Ryan nodded to Tom. "Let's go down there."
As they approached, Tom could see more people arriving, neighbors he'd known for decades, families with children, even the mayor and two council members.
They stood awkwardly near the back.
Harrington was trying to push past the reporter.
"I have permits and legal rights to this property. These people are trespassing." Ryan stepped forward.
"Actually, sir, they're standing on the public road.
No one has crossed your gate."
The environmental lawyer who had arrived with the seals approached Harrington.
"I'm Daniel Conway, environmental law specialist.
We filed an emergency injunction this morning regarding your water rights claims."
He handed Harrington a document. "Our research indicates the deed transfer from 1967 specifically excluded lake access rights. Those remained with the county." Harrington's face reddened.
"My legal team reviewed everything.
This is a delay tactic."
"Perhaps your team missed some details," Conway replied calmly. "The county archives provided the original documents this morning.
The judge has ordered all construction halted pending review." Tom watched as Harrington conferred urgently with his associates. More townspeople continued to arrive. Someone had brought coffee and donuts. Children ran, playing between groups of adults. Sarah Chen approached Tom. "Mr. Miller, would you be willing to share your story? We understand you've been fishing this lake for over 60 years. Tom hesitated, uncomfortable with the attention. Ryan placed a hand on his shoulder.
"Your story matters," Ryan said quietly.
"It's how things change." Tom nodded slowly. "My father brought me here when I was 5 years old. Taught me to fish right over there by those willows. I taught my son in the same spot."
As Tom spoke, he noticed Harrington watching him from a distance. The developer's expression had changed from anger to calculation. Bill approached with a cup of coffee for Tom.
"Half the town is here now," Bill said.
"Even Judge Peterson showed up, and he never leaves his house except for court." Tom looked around at the gathering crowd. People he'd known his entire life, standing together. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope. By mid-afternoon, the crowd had grown to over 200 people.
The news vans had multiplied.
What started as a local story was quickly gaining regional attention. Tom sat on a folding chair someone had brought him, watching as Harrington huddled with his lawyers near their vehicles.
The bulldozers remained silent and still.
Ryan approached with a tall man in his 50s. "Mr. Miller, this is Lieutenant Commander Wilson." The officer extended his hand. "Your son saved my life, Mr. Miller."
I never got to thank his father in person.
Tom stood to shake his hand.
Daniel never mentioned it. He wouldn't have, Wilson said.
He wasn't one to boast, but I've never forgotten what he did.
Sarah Chen's news segment aired on the Midday Report.
The story focused on the community's fight to preserve public access to natural resources. Tom's brief interview, where he spoke about 3 generations of his family fishing the lake, became the emotional center of the piece.
By 3 o'clock, Harrington requested a meeting.
They gathered at a picnic table near the lake entrance. Harrington and his lawyer, Tom, Ryan, Lieutenant Wilson, the environmental attorney, and the mayor.
This situation has gotten out of hand, Harrington began. I'm willing to discuss a compromise. The environmental lawyer nodded. We're listening.
I can set aside 30% of the shoreline for public access, Harrington offered.
A designated area for fishing and recreation. Tom shook his head. This lake has always been for everyone. 30% isn't enough. The mayor cleared his throat. The county archives showed the original deed specifically preserved public access rights. We overlooked this when reviewing your permits.
Harrington's lawyer whispered something to him.
Harrington frowned.
The negative publicity is already affecting investor confidence, he admitted reluctantly. I propose this: we develop only the eastern shore with luxury homes. The western shore remains public access with improved facilities that we will fund.
Lieutenant Wilson leaned forward. And the environmental concerns? The runoff from construction could damage the lake ecosystem. We'll implement additional protections beyond code requirements, Harrington said.
And establish a conservation fund for the lake's long-term health. The negotiations continued for another hour. By the end, they had reached an agreement. 50% of the shoreline would remain public, with improved access points and facilities.
Harrington would modify his development plans to be more environmentally sensitive. A community board, including Tom, would oversee lake conservation efforts.
3 months later, Tom sat on the new public dock, fishing pole in hand. Beside him, his 8-year-old grandson Jake concentrated on his bobber floating in the water. Remember, fishing is about patience, Tom said quietly. Your great-grandfather taught me that right here, Jake replied seriously. Ryan and 2 other seals approached along the shoreline path. They had visited several times since that day, forming an unexpected friendship with Tom.
Any bites today? Ryan asked, sitting on the dock beside them. Not yet, Jake replied seriously. But Grandpa says the best things come to those who wait. Tom smiled.
The new sign at the lake entrance read, Lake Willow Community Park and Nature Preserve. The development on the eastern shore was proceeding, but with strict environmental controls. The western shore, where generations of families had fished, remained open to everyone. You know, Tom said to Ryan, I never expected things to turn out this way.
Ryan nodded. Sometimes all it takes is one person standing up for what's right. Then others find the courage to stand too. Tom watched his grandson's face light up as his fishing line suddenly went taut.
Some things changed, but the important things remained the same. The lake would be here for Jake's children too, just as it had been for Tom. Love this story, Tom said, tapping that like button as he smiled. And don't forget to subscribe to Unfolding Tales for more. Let us know how this story made you feel with a single word in the comments. As the community stood together, the sun began to set over the lake, casting a warm golden glow across the water. Tom sat back, content, as the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air.
The once quiet lakeshore, now bustling with life, felt more alive than ever. Jake pulled up his fishing line, his face lit up with excitement. I caught one, Grandpa.
Tom turned and smiled at his grandson, his heart swelling with pride.
You did it, Jake. You're a natural.
He ruffled his grandson's hair, the lake's timeless presence providing a sense of continuity through the generations. The crowd around the lake slowly began to disperse, but the victory felt monumental. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, the community had won.
Lake Willow would remain open to all, as it had been for generations.
And as Tom looked around, he saw that the fight had brought his town together. In some ways, they had all become family, united by a common cause. Ryan and the seals waved as they began to walk back along the shore.
"We'll be back soon, Tom," Ryan called out. "Keep in touch, okay?"
"I will," Tom replied, giving him a thumbs up. As Tom turned back to the water, he saw the old wooden dock in the distance, the same dock where he had cast his first line all those years ago. The lake would always be a part of him, a part of his family, a part of Pinewood County. And with it, the memories of 1,000 fishing trips, passed down through the generations, would live on. The story of Lake Willow wasn't just about water rights or luxury homes. It was about a community's fight to preserve its history, its way of life, and its shared connection to the land. It was a reminder that sometimes, standing up for what's right can bring about real change. As the evening drew to a close, Tom stood up, dusting off his pants. He looked down at his grandson, who was eagerly showing off the fish he had caught. Tom smiled again, feeling at peace. "I think we're going to make a great fishing team, Jake." And as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Tom knew that the lake would always be there, just as it had been for him, for his father, for his son, and now, for his grandson. The lake was more than just water, it was a legacy that would continue to grow, one generation at a time. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an exciting story. See you next time.